Jackie's here, changing life loving you. Yeah, that's the groove, life loving you. Feel the truth, move, life loving you. It's all we do, come on through, it's just for you.
So, sex. It just brings to mind so many different emotions and feelings. I think that people today are more open to talk about sex than they were when I was coming up. Sex was definitely taboo, was something that you don't talk about, in decent places. But there's a big difference to me between sex and intimacy. They're not the same. They're not one and the same. Where sex is a mechanical act, right? Intimacy can be a part of sex, but it really doesn't have to be. Sex is more about the physical, whereas intimacy, while it can include the physical, is more about the emotional and the psychological connection with another person at a very deep level. So even couples can have sex or they can make love, And so to me, intimacy was something that I definitely wanted in my relationship. It needed to mean something and not just be limited to a mechanical act. Sex is just so important in any marriage. I think it is so important. And what I realize is that just like the phrase making love, it's like a battery, You make more love every time that you come together. That coupling together creates something that the couple needs. It's almost like that energy to run another day or to go throughout the week. So I think it's very, very important. But I think it has its place. So I don't think it should be the first thing that you know about a person. I think that when you bring sex into the marriage, though, and you couple it with intimacy, it creates the ability for the couple to evolve together and for the love to blossom from where it is today into its next phase or its next level of its glory. I know when I was first married, I was taught, you're this good girl. And I really thought that I was banging. I thought I was really kind of open and creative, inventive sexually. But I really realized that one of the things I didn't like to do was to initiate. Somehow in the way that I was raised, I felt like, it was the man's place. Just like the man takes the garbage out, I felt like it was the man that primarily initiated sexual encounters. So being married to my husband, I realized that, okay, so that's really not true. And I had to really kind of acclimate to playing both roles, the little damsel and then the one that's the tigress that needs to initiate. But I found that that didn't just come naturally to me. I really had to kind of walk through it and figure out why I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And it was that I had to step out of the garment of tradition and the garment of, the 80s that I think that I was raised in. And so that was an interesting point of discovery for me. I think that we all have to recognize that gender does play a role in sexuality, in sex, and in intimacy. I think that there are behaviors that we're most comfortable with because it's what we hear as being normal and acceptable. And so gender does play a role. We believe that, or I did believe, that men were to be the aggressors and that men would usually want sex more than you. And that's really not true. Hopefully, you want to be matched well with someone where your sexual drive and theirs is most compatible. But that's just not always the case. And I thought about my mother, and I thought about how could the way that I was raised reflect something about her and her past. And what I kind of thought about was what it was like to be her back in the 50s, back in the 60s. And I think it was very different. Back then it was like, just don't have sex, don't get pregnant. And good girl, and it was really said, good girls did this, whereas bad girls did something different. And so I think the way that my mother talked to me about sex, or the lack thereof of talking about sex, is very prominent. First of all, I'm still waiting to get the speech about the birds and the bees. First of all, I don't know why they even call it the birds and the bees. Why can't we just say sex? Because again, the word is hard to say out loud. But I've never gotten that talk. My mother never told me anything really about sexual encounters. When I was engaged, when I got married, nothing. I think I was left to figure it out for myself. You know, I have a lot of clients that are dealing with their own conflicts in their relationship. And what I've noticed of late is I started getting so many younger clients. We could be talking about issues with their communication or issues with their parenting, infidelity. It would always eventually start to center around sex and sexual issues. And I don't know, I've never seen so many young people have sexual dysfunction, if it's ED or low libido, low T, or women that feel that they're frigid or unable to reach, an orgasm. And so, I used to try to refer people. And then I started doing my homework and I'm realizing that a lot of these sex therapists weren't really that helpful. They weren't saying anything beyond what I would tell a couple. So I've had couples talk about using sex toys, and you might not like my position on it. My position is really unusual in that I don't really see the point of using sex toys early on if you say that you're trying to spice it up. Now think about it. Don't get mad, but I've been married for 31 years. If you're only 5 years in and you need to spice it up already, how are you ever going to go the distance? We only have, you have access point A, access point B, and maybe access point C. And there's only, you have some sex toys, but you really don't have that many different combinations on what you can do with them. So I feel like people are not getting really attached to one another, and they're not digging down to this level of intimacy that creates something new. I think that people use sex toys because they're looking for like this next great thing, this great pleasure plus. And I think that it's the wrong target, because you can't always have the same payoff that you always had, because we know chemically that the brain is changing. Those endorphins and oxytocin and all of those love chemicals, they're not circulating at the same level once you're 4, 5, 6 years in. I just want couples to accept the changes more readily and to see them as a positive and not a negative, because even as there's ebbs in that sexual relationship, it's going to produce something deeper and more intimate and more long lasting, just as pleasurable, but different. And so I don't know if we're using a lot of the sex toys early on to mask, something that we're chasing. And I just don't want people to do that. I want you to go with the flow. Let your sex life evolve and look at it through a different lens of what is it that this season of my marriage is bringing to me that I didn't have versus what I'm losing. And I'm just thinking, if you're bored 5 years in, there's no way you're going to make it to 31 years. I mean, you would have divorced, been off and on to the next person. So I say, use sex toys to spice things up and to keep things lively, but don't introduce them too early on. Keeping your sex life spicy can mean so many different things. Most of all, I think it means that you don't start to lose spontaneity. What I started to notice is that once you've been married for a long period of time, you start to create this rhythm or this pattern. But the one thing that's different about it and being fresh in love and newly married is spontaneity. I mean, you could just be eating dinner. Oh my God, I'm so hungry. You catch a glimpse of the other person's eye, and then the next thing you know it, you're steamed up and you guys are on the dining room table having more than dinner. So in my mind, spontaneity is really the key. That's the secret ingredient. That's the secret sauce to keeping things spicy, is staying away from that boring pattern that you often get locked into after you start having children. Listen, when you have kids, I remember my husband and I, we'd be just trying to figure out how we could get it in because, you're trying to get the kids on the schedule so that they go to bed on time so you can have that time to be alone together. But, when there's a will, there's a way. I think your sexuality is something that's inside of you. Some people are just really sexy. I remember I knew this girl in college. When she would talk, she was like, she would do her lips a certain way, like she would touch herself while she was talking. Jackie, and she'd always be doing this kind of stuff. That was a sexy heifer. I'm not so sexy. I'm more funny. I'm telling jokes. I think I'm kind of like midstream. I'm like the average girl. I wouldn't say that I'm sexy at all, but I came to my sexuality just by being me. So the way that I show up sexually it's a part of my identity, and it's who I am and what I do. And hopefully, that clicks with your partner. Luckily for me, it clicks very well with my husband. So I remember when I was at the University of Miami my freshman year, I had a wisdom tooth that wouldn't grow out properly. Next thing I know, I'm having surgery, and the dentist figures out that I had all 4 of them. So I was like, I don't want to take the time. Just take them all out at once. That was not a good decision. I woke up with the man's foot on the side of the chair with some pliers in my mouth, pulling my teeth out. Long and short, I was so sick. I was throwing up. I couldn't keep the pain pills down. I lost about 15, 20 pounds. I was banging though. Listen, my signature move was heels and shorts. I could stop traffic. I think that was a time where I really began to recognize my sexual prowess, that wow, men will look at you and desire you. And it was really kind of nice. And I think that I took that intersection of really discovering my sexuality, and I looked at it, I liked it, but I also understood that it was something that I had to be very careful with, because you wanted to make sure you didn't send mixed signals. But that was a great discovery. I wish I still had those legs, honey. I must say, even though I had the banging legs and that body was on point, I still did not feel very good being naked. I just don't like nudity that much. So I don't think it's about more than anything, apart from me just being kind of shy that way. I have my moments. I have the times where I feel that I want to be that type of a person, and then other times when I don't. I'm more shy and reserved, and it fluctuates. And I think those are the things that keep the relationship spicy, because you show up differently at different times, and it keeps things interesting. Once you've been married 31 years, who's shy about frequency? I mean, I think I told you that it was difficult for me to get used to initiating. That was early on. Now I'm a girl with a bag of tricks. I mean, I know what I'm doing. So I wouldn't say that it's a complicated thing for me now to initiate or to express my desire for my husband. And you know what you say to him or what you do to let them know that, hey, there's interest here. And you just hope that the response is not interested. Hey, Dr. Jacquie here. I'm your how-to lady. How to do life, how to do love, and how to do you, boo. So click, like, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more to come.